Started. Welcome, everyone. We're excited to be here today and have you join us for Service Learning, Building a Collaborative Space for Students and Communities. We're honored to be part of the 2020 Independent Charter School Virtual Conference. We want to just share with you a little bit about service learning and how students are learning while leading positive change in their communities. So my name is Amy Mewers, and I'm the CEO of the National Youth Leadership Council. I've had the opportunity to be part of this amazing organization for the past 17 years, the last 5 as CEO. My passion is really around developing young people as leaders, leaders who care about the issues that are affecting our world today and who want to act on those values of positive contribution throughout their lifetime. So our mission at NYLC supports my personal passion, and it's to create a more just, sustainable, and peaceful world with young people, their schools, and communities through service learning. NYLC has been a leader in service learning for nearly 40 years because we know that when young people have a voice in their education, they understand why their learning is important and how they can make a positive impact on issues that they care about, that they really become engaged in school, and they also develop as those civically informed and engaged global citizens that we need to see. And today I have the pleasure to co-present with my friend and colleague, Tiffany Searles. Tiffany?
Hi, my name's Tiffany Searles, as Amy said. Thank you, Amy. And I'm the Director of Community Engagement at New Foundations Charter School, which is a K-12 public charter school in Northeast Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. I've been with New Foundations for 11 years. I've had a few different roles. My current role is focuses on building community partnerships, building our alumni association. We've just recently graduated our 7th year of seniors. So we're 20 years old, and 10 years ago we opened a high school. So we're really excited about building our alumni and keeping them connected to our school. I work on parent and family engagement, and I also manage the communications department of our school. And the mission of New Foundations is focused on social, not only academic achievement, but social and emotional foundations, building those so that students can become high achieving, socially competent stewards of their community. And service learning is a strategy that we've used to hit a lot of these academic standards while also helping our students be socially and emotionally competent and give back to their communities. And you can see a photo of one of our 3rd grade classes working in our school and community garden in the back of our campus. So if you are interested in learning more about our school, the website's newfoundations.org, and you can check it out.
So we are going to try a poll, and it looks like, unfortunately, here we go. We have our active poll there, so hopefully you can see where to answer these questions. If not, if you don't see the poll function, please just enter them into the chat. But we want to learn a little bit about who you are. So what role you play, what knowledge you have of service learning, and is service or service learning a requirement in your state? So we'll just take a few seconds here and give you time to answer the poll or to add those to the chat function, whichever is easiest for you. It looks like we have some folks adding to that. That's wonderful. As you're sharing a little bit more about you, why don't we tell you a little bit more about service learning?
Sure. So what is service learning? So something that I really want to drive home and make sure that everybody who's on the call today understands is that service learning is a method of instruction. It's under the umbrella of project-based learning, and it has a service output. So a lot of times when folks hear about service learning, they might think it's something additional or extra that they need to do in their classroom or in their program. And we're here to tell you and hopefully share some ideas with you about how you can use service learning as a method to teach the standards and all of the things that you want your students to learn.
Wonderful. So now that you know a little bit about what service learning is, why should you use it? Can we have the next slide, Tiff? Yeah. Why service learning? So we know it's a proven instructional strategy. It puts youth in the driver's seat. It increases their engagement, civic mindedness, and college and career readiness while meeting those academic requirements. It does break down barriers, increasing youth's ability to work with people of different backgrounds while directly increasing their civic engagement. And it does deepen competencies required for college and career life. But it also increases youth's ability to lead. So those leaders who set direction, create vision and inspiration, they guide us into the future. I think we can all agree that good leaders are people we want to work for, we want to elect, and that we want in positions of decision making. There are people we want to lead us into the future. I often hear people, really us adults, talking about wanting our children to develop those leadership skills, those 21st century skills needed to be successful in career and life. But we often fear the idea of students actually leading right now. Sometimes we even silently, or maybe not so silently with our peers, talk about those students who use their voice to express an opinion that was different than ours, right? When you share their voice, their power, often we're scared because their ideas and way of doing things are different than our own. We want them to develop as leaders, but we don't want really that change, that giving up of our own personal leadership and control to be part of it. So in order for students to grow and lead, we really need to overcome our own fear, and changes how we engage students, how we hear students, and how we give students voice. And service learning does that. I always like to think about, if you remember when you were little and you think about how the world was full of possibilities, right? What if you had that opportunity to try and make your dreams a reality? That's really what service learning does. It gives young people the opportunity to learn and grow by using their voice to take action on issues that they really care about. It allows them to get creative with endless possibilities and to apply them to real world needs. And sometimes they fail at it, and that's okay. But service learning, when we reflect and we learn from those failures, we also learn to carry on and that we have to keep trying. And so why service learning? It's because we have to keep trying. Like, we have poverty, climate change, inequity, food and water scarcity. All of these world problems need young people and leaders who are willing to address them and keep trying. So that's why for service learning.
I love that. And just to chime in, I think the NYLC does a really beautiful job at doing these things in action. You have youth on your board, you have youth kind of at every level of the organization sharing their voice and giving them opportunities to be part of that journey and have their voice heard and giving them responsibilities that we often don't give youth an opportunity to do. And I really think that's something that you all do really well, and it's kind of woven in the fabric of what you do. So you might even not even remember or acknowledge the fact that that's such a distinctive part of your organization and something that I think my organization and other organizations should really strive to model what you're doing too.
Thank you. So one of the things that we like to stress at NYLC is that service learning is a process, not a project. So through service learning, students tackle community issues while learning their English, math, social studies, science, arts, music, language. Students really connect to community, and it deepens the impact of projects. It deepens the impact of their learning through the projects that they're doing. Students understand what they are learning and how they can use it now and in the future. And they're learning that they have the power and voice to make a positive change. So if you walk away with something from this, is that service learning isn't that project in the community, that single project, that act. It's an entire learning process. So what I'd love to do is share a little bit with you about the difference between service and service learning. So again, service learning is often confused with service or volunteer, especially volunteer hours within a school day. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the term service learning used when referring to that required service component as part of graduation. I'm not really a fan of mandatory service hours for students. I believe strongly in service. We all need to serve, right? So it's really what helps us move forward as a democracy. If we're volunteering for a nonprofit or coaching a youth baseball team or helping out in the classroom, that service component is really what holds our nation together. But service learning is a teaching and learning strategy. It helps students make those connections outside of the classroom. So it's that hands-on learning, but most importantly, it connects to community and it empowers each student to lead change, and not as a liberator of a community, but rather in partnership with the community. So here we just have, you can see community service. It meets the needs of others in the community. It can be that one-time event or a reoccurring commitment to volunteer. And it may or may not involve critical reflection. Service learning, though, it meets the needs of the community while including learning, leadership, character, and I would also add their civic goals. It follows a structured process to make sure both service goals and learning goals are met. And reflection on that experience is extremely important, and it's an effort to understand the underlying causes. So through the reflection process, students really learn and grow throughout the experience.
Awesome. And I always say, I think when I'm making this differentiation, a lot of times I tell people community service and volunteering certainly isn't bad, right? Most of us are coming from schools. This is a school-based conference. And so we have this opportunity to really amplify and lift up and enhance the volunteering or community service experience by engaging in this process of service learning that can meet so many goals that we're already trying to reach for our students, just by structuring maybe the experience a little bit differently or incorporating some key pieces that can turn us, amp us up from service, community service to service learning. So there's a standardized process for service learning, and there are 5 different categories that kind of fall in this process. So the process is, the acronym for the process is called the IPART process, and you can see this graphic on your screen. So there's investigation, planning and preparing, action, reflection, and demonstration. We're going to go over each of the areas in a little bit more depth, defining what they mean and then giving some examples. But what I want to point out about this graphic that I think is really important to notice is reflection. And you can see that reflection kind of is in the middle, and it goes kind of all the way throughout the process. So while it's placed in between action and demonstration, which is the most obvious and general and common time that reflection happens, right before the end, after you've completed the service, we ask our students, how was your experience? What did you do? It's really important to continue to reflect, maybe in the beginning before we start. Why are we doing this? And figuring out why are we even engaging in this service learning? And really throughout the process so that we can make changes before the project is done if possible. And there's all different lengths of time a service learning project can take place. And so how often you reflect or when you reflect might be different depending on how, what the duration and intensity of your project is. But it's important to at least be thoughtful about where in my experience can I inject some reflection.
Before you jump forward, Tiff, I also just wanted to share, if you look at the diagram, you can see that it is a pie. and that the service component of the pie is actually the smallest piece. So the learning really comes through the investigation, planning, reflection, and demonstration. There is learning that occurs, and some powerful learning that occurs through the action itself. But really, those connections to standards and SEL, character, whatever those learning goals you have for your students, that comes through the process of service learning. So I just wanted to share that. And I would also say a lot of times teachers come to us and they already know what action they want their students to take. And even if you start with the action, you can still direct students through this process by bringing them back to investigation. And why are they doing this action? What is the root cause, or what is what are the issues around the action that they're going to be addressing? So again, the IPART process itself is how we connect to those learning outcomes for students, and the active service is really just a small component of the overall process.
Yes, that's amazing. A great point. Thank you for sharing that and elevating that idea, because exactly to your point. So investigation. So a lot of times in my experience facilitating service projects with youth or teachers is, to Amy's point earlier, that we already have an idea of the service we want to do. And it is really important to have an idea or maybe know what you want to do, but it is equally important, if not more important, to verify that the need that you think exists really exists. And so we ask our students and our faculty to investigate the social issue and the needs related to that social issue. You might see something on the news that homelessness is an issue in San Francisco, but you might live in Kentucky and you want to do a service project, but you realize maybe that homelessness isn't a need in your community, but food access is a need in your community. So it's important to take the time to make sure that you are meeting with key constituents in your community, maybe surveying your community members, or just having some conversations with your family, your neighbors, the community organizations, the businesses, the elected officials, right? Listening to the media coverage locally where you're going to be doing the service, just to see if your ideas are really meeting the needs that truly exist in the community you want to serve. And that will ensure that the service project you do is meaningful and impactful for not just the student's experience, but also for the community you're trying to serve. So I have some examples. I know we're in a hybrid model, we're in remote model, some of us are back to school. So I'm going to share two examples for each part of the IPART process, one that we did in person and one way that we've translated it into virtual. So the first example is our kindergarten students went and visited a local firehouse to learn more. Their theme for their unit was community helpers. And a lot of times I think when faculty are starting to plan their service, they always think that they're going to go out into the community during the service part or the action part. And this is an example of when you can engage community partners at any point in the IPART process. And so we actually took our field trip in the beginning, and this helps pique interest and get students excited about what's going to happen. And it makes students feel that these ideas that they come up with for the service project are their own. So we visited this firehouse, and they learned from this fireman that, they're out there working and they're kind of sitting and hanging out at the firehouse waiting to be called. And sometimes it gets a little bit boring. And so they wanted to bake them some snacks and solicit money to buy them some goodies while they were waiting. And then also they learned that they're putting their lives at risk when they do get called and have to go fight really dangerous fires, and they spend a long time away from their family, and they put themselves in harm's way to protect their community. And so students decided that they wanted to handwrite some thank you cards and draw pictures for our local firemen and women. And so that was a result of just going out there, getting to know the people in our community who are serving and protecting. So another example of how we do this virtually is sometimes we're doing more local projects and sometimes we're doing more global projects. And so our 8th grade had a guest speaker from Uganda come into their classroom. So this photo is actually from when we were still doing live instruction. But of course, we could do this remotely, right? This person Skyped into the classroom, but we can have people join our Zoom rooms, our Google Hangouts, and share about what's going on in their community. And because of virtual learning, I think, everyone looks at all the negatives around virtual learning, but the opportunities become pretty boundless around who we can have guest speaking in our classroom for a few reasons. One, geography doesn't matter anymore. We can have people from all over the country and the world in our classrooms. And also, a lot of folks are home. They're not working, they're working remotely, and they have a little bit more freedom in their schedule. And so they're able to pop on and share 30 minutes with your class and teach them a little bit about what they do or how they've been volunteering or what needs are in their community. So this really helps students. It gives students an opportunity to hear from someone other than the teacher, which I think is really important. Those of you that might be instructors know that sometimes just having a fresh voice tell them the same thing that you might be telling them can land differently and go a long way. And it helps spark ideas, and they can ask questions to somebody who's there working in the field or in that community that the teacher wouldn't be able to answer on their own.
So I just wanted to share a few tips and resources. And Welsey's been working hard to be able to support our teachers as they try to take service learning virtual. So we put together a list of resources that you can use, our students can use in the investigation phase. So we have a picto chart where they can make infographics and presentations and how to share their information. StoryCorps has, they can record meaningful conversation, and there's a whole archive at the Library of Congress that they can delve into. Virtual field trips is a great resource. We use Slido quite a bit with our young people to do live polls. So young people could also use that to poll community partners and experts to get responses to how they can meet community needs. Noodle Tools is a great research tool for students, as is Newsella. I think that's how you say that. That's how I say it anyway. So that provides schools with up-to-date content that supports your students. So just some investigation tools that students can use when they're starting their service learning project. And we have all of these tips and resources listed on our website, but it's also available in the recording of this presentation that'll be made available to you.
Yeah, I was just noticing how fun some of these names are. They really do have some engaging and fun creative names for resources these days, huh? It's funny. I like it. So for planning and preparation, we need to make a plan to figure out the project that we're going to do. Anybody who's ever done a project or planned anything, a party, an event, knows that a lot of logistics go into making a project happen and making sure that it's successful. Something that is important to notice to consider is that it's not just sitting down and saying, okay, what do we have to do? Let's do it. I think assessing what types of resources and relationships and partnerships and tools do you already have available at your disposal, and starting there is a really helpful way to plan a project. Having a relationship maybe with your administration or the maintenance folks or the secretary, whoever does your morning announcements or sends out your communication. These are all really important things to assess and figure out who you might need to speak to in order to make your project successful. And then thinking about if you have any community partners. And it's really important to think about not just maybe the organization that is going to be the beneficiary of your service, but maybe you need some finances to get your project going. And maybe everyone in your school always eats at the local deli. Maybe asking the deli to donate a gift card for a raffle, or asking the local deli to donate sandwiches for your event, right? Really just thinking critically about the relationships you already have, and maybe even having some forethought about what partnerships you can begin to develop that can support projects moving forward if you're going to make this project a yearly or a quarterly event. And then assessing your team, your group. Is it a small group in your class? Is it a whole class project? What skills or talents do the students have? A lot of times I've run into concerns and trouble when students want to make a video. Our students always want to make videos. And now with iPhones and the apps and technology that's available to students, the videos are coming out much better. But I would say 5 or 10 years ago when we started making videos for things, we didn't have any students who knew how to shoot a video, edit a video, and it took a lot of time and energy to do that. So thinking through making sure that the project that we're going to plan actually is something we can physically do. And if not, who do we need to work with in order to make that happen? So planning and prep. So this was a after-school program that we had called SLAM, Service Learning Ambassadors and Mentors, and we actually did an overnight retreat. And the students were planning a recycling project that they wanted to do. So each group got together and brainstormed out all of the projects that they wanted to do, all of the needs that they had, all of the resources that they had, and they just sat and worked on it, hashed it out together. And so when you are together and in person and not remote, you can physically have a meeting to get working through all of these things. And so that's what they did for this. And again, another piece that's really important in the planning and preparation is setting some time-bound goals. These students created SMART goals and did some backwards planning, knowing that they wanted to have a goal date of X, and then how many weeks prior to that would they need to do the certain tasks that they needed to do to make sure that the recycling project went off without a hitch. And so they just used flip chart paper, which feels archaic now that we're online. But I'm a visual person and I like to see things written out and I like to still handwrite things. So this is how they did it when they were together. So when you're virtual, you can still do similar planning and preparing. We use the Zoom platform at New Foundations, which I think many people do, even with Google Meet. I know there's opportunities to do breakout rooms. And so we use a lot of tools to guide the conversation. So we have planning tools like an action guide and things that we have students use and fill out as a guide so that they know which questions to ask, depending on the grade level, right? We can do this from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade and higher ed. And so maybe we're asking them just to fill out the 5 W's. So what are different ways that we can scaffold the questions so that students can be successful? But allowing students to go into breakout groups or breakout rooms and answer specific questions about the project, giving them some working time, and then bringing them back together to present to each other and to the rest of the class for feedback. This is a lot of times the way that we would do group projects in general, in the classroom or without, but this is with a service output, and we'll have a process that helps students learn and grow.
Wonderful. So again, some great resources for getting students really engaged in the planning and preparation. So I will say, a lot of times teachers feel like they have to do all the planning and preparing for the action. Again, if you think back to that IPART pie, the planning and preparation, investigation, planning and preparation is a huge portion of the opportunity for students to learn. So as they're engaging in the planning and preparing, that's where you can really connect to student learning goals. So I can't pronounce this one. It's a mind mapping tool. MindMup, I think, is a mind mapping tool where you can create and publish and share your mind maps. So great for like group thinking and consensus building. Proceedin is a timeline maker. Storyboard, that is very fun. You can plot diagrams, if students are thinking about maps, like community maps, and creating quizzes and story cubes and all the creative things that if you think about, then you could grade or look at for credit. That's a great resource. And then, of course, you have all of your Microsoft, whether it's Excel or Word, and your Google documents where you can, coordinate in sheets or all of those things. So just some great places where students can really plan and prepare for that action and who's going to do what, and really, again, build that sense of team as they're doing that.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point about planning and preparing the role of the teacher versus the role of the students. And I know for teachers, it's very hard to kind of relinquish some control or structure of your class. And I really have found that it takes some, getting used to in order to give students, empowering students to do things. An example I always think about is when I want to solicit donations or get approval for something. What I used to do is just do it and then tell the students, we got approval. But I really like to have the students, I write a script and I teach the students how to make the phone calls. Our students don't know, in my experience, our students don't know how to use the phone. They know how to text. They kind of know how to email. They certainly don't know how to call, make a professional phone call. And so even just that experience is really helpful. And it takes a little bit of planning on our end to write a script and to coach students in that way, which feels a little bit different. But to me, it's really been beneficial because if we have those conversations in 6th grade and 8th grade, we can just say, okay, now you make the phone call and they're good to go. So that's been really, really hard for me to learn in the beginning, but then helpful to watch them learn and grow through this process and gain these really important skills as well. So it's a good point. So for action, so it's a pretty self-explanatory. This is when they're doing the service. There's a few different types of service that can be engaged in. So direct service is hands-on work. So you're in direct contact with the beneficiary. You're at a soup kitchen serving folks who are hungry. Indirect service is provided without any direct contact to the beneficiary. So you might be planting a garden that's going to help the community, but you're not interfacing with the community. Advocacy is telling, writing, educating, or persuading others about a community need. A lot of times in school, we default to advocacy because we don't have to necessarily bring folks into the school or bring the students out into the community. We can share information. Our students love animals. And so a lot of times we're doing advocacy on behalf of animals, talking about adoption versus purchasing animals, etc. So you can really do any of these types of service or a combination. And to the point of, defaulting to advocacy in a school setting, if you don't have the ability to leave your school, you can still do direct and indirect service even in your school building. It just depends on how you define community. So community could be another class in your school. It could be the parents of your school. It could be the board of trustees. It could be the teachers. One of our 8th graders was doing a project on health, and they noticed that their teachers drink too much coffee. And so they did a coffee alternative presentation at one of the faculty meetings, which I thought was really interesting. So sometimes the action can also be just thinking about how you define community and what community you want to serve, and then figuring out how you're going to serve. And Amy brought this up earlier. Thinking about not just we're going to come in and save and we're going to come in and change and we're going to come in and fix, but this action and service learning is really about working with a community organization or a community to bring about a change or to improve the community. So thinking about how we're not just going to do a project in isolation and then share it with the benefactor, but as much as we can bring the benefactor into the conversation as early as possible is really, in my experience, what has shown the most success and the most beautiful and meaningful outcomes for everybody who's involved in the service. So here's a really cute example of one of our students reading to, so the topic for this second grade was getting older. And so the students learned that there was a lot of elderly people in our society who don't have much interaction with people outside of their age bracket or the nurses or the practitioners in their care facility. And so they wanted to go read stories, and they also did arts and crafts and put on a talent show for the residents of this independent living facility. And so this was a really meaningful experience for both the students and the elderly population that was in the independent living facility. So a virtual example. So we can't go out and go to the independent living facilities, certainly not during COVID. There's a lot of restrictions. But we put our last spring, so we do a service day every spring for our K-8 students, and that happens in May. And we weren't able to do much, the way that we used to do it because of COVID in May this year. And so we used the What Kids Need theme for first grade. And we shared it with the K-8 students, and we suggested that they do a spring cleaning of their own clothes and toys to share with other kids in their community who were in need. So students were able to do this in the comfort of their own homes and assess, what's something I was really excited to get that maybe doesn't fit me anymore, or I used to play with when I was little, and now I play with this other thing, and I can give it to another kid in need in my community. So they packaged everything up, and their parents helped them bring it to local drop boxes in their community. And it was a way that they could be isolated, be safe, and still make a difference while they were staying home.
So there are a lot of amazing opportunities for young people to take action. And as Tiffany shared, everything doesn't have to be that direct service, right? So there's a great app called Story Jumper, where students can write, create, and publish their own stories. So when you think about the education part that can be service learning, Story Jumper is a great app for that. Issa Lee can turn data into infographics. Book Creator allows students to create those digital books. Anchor is a great spot to create, distribute, and host podcasts for free. So there's a lot of great tools out there that young people can use to really educate others and share with whatever their community is defined as. There's some great projects in elementary schools where young people are creating those education campaigns around washing hands, and then the Batman cough and some of those things. We have some of our older students right now are doing community healing projects. So they're taking action by working with the community to create healing projects. And for some of them, it's creating poetry that they'll share. For some of them, it's designing murals. For others, it's interviewing people who've had what their experiences have been with COVID and publishing that. So there's so many different opportunities for young people to take action, and there's a lot of great, and this is just a few, but a lot of great applications out there that can help students really advocate, educate, and provide that indirect service.
These look cool. I don't know all of them. I'm looking forward to checking them out. So reflection. I chatted about this earlier and mentioned that, it's a really, really important part of the process. I would argue that reflection is one of the key ways that you can really transform a service experience to a service learning experience. It should be ongoing, and it's an opportunity not only to think about how am I doing and how is this project going. It's to also figure out, are the goals being met, and kind of, is this effective? So kind of a threefold: is this effective? Are the goals being met? And how am I doing in this experience? And the other piece that's really important to think about when reflection is, we tend to have these defaults that we do for reflection. So take out your journal and respond to this prompt, right? And that's fine, and that works. But that doesn't work for all students all the time. The other one that we go to is let's get into a circle and have a conversation, right? Like let's share our experience verbally and orally. And again, while some students, we know who they are, love to talk a lot and are really oral processors, and they're excited to, talk about their day and how things are going, some students don't respond to that as well. And so giving them an opportunity to paint a picture, to draw a picture, to create a collage, maybe to one of my most favorite reflection prompts that I've ever seen was drawing a maze. And so having students, if they're like more of a mathematical brain, they can draw a maze and then talk about different dead ends or roadblocks that maybe came up. And that was a different way for them to have some spatial and mathematical reasoning in their reflection. You could take a nature walk and have students internally reflect. So there's lots of different ways that we can mix up our reflection options, and maybe giving students 2 or 3 options each time, and they can choose the modality that works for them. So this is a really fun example, and it's an example of actually like a reflection experience that happened not at the end, but more in the beginning of that planning and preparation and investigation. So our 6th grade students were working on a project for the visually impaired, and they were trying to figure out what they wanted the output to be, but they were having a really hard time trying to understand what it felt like to be visually impaired, because they were all fortunate enough to see. And so what we decided is that we were going to have students walk in pairs around the school, one blindfolded and one not, and to really try and experience what it felt like to be visually impaired. And so these 2 students walked around the school for 5 minutes, trusting the other person. And then we came back and we had a conversation about how they felt and how that would change what they wanted the output of their project to be. And the students really opened up, and it really geared the project in a way, kind of in a different way than what they were originally thinking. And so just kind of in the process of investigation and planning and preparation, mostly investigation, honestly, the students took an opportunity. The teachers saw this as an opportunity for reflection and allowed them to kind of sidetrack for a minute, do this experience, and it really enhanced the project much better than it would have been without this kind of pause and activity to take a moment and reflect. So again, that was in person. For virtual, there's this really cool app that I think Amy's going to speak about called Padlet. But Padlet, I couldn't find a real class example, so this is an example I found online. But Padlet's a great resource where you can have students post things so that they can either draw, they can respond by drawing, they can respond by writing, they can respond by taking a picture, they can respond by finding an image or a picture around how the experience made them feel, or whatever prompt you want to give them to reflect. They can post it on Padlet, and everybody in the class can see it. And then it's basically like a message board, and you can begin to comment on other people's posts. You can ask questions. So it's a really cool way virtually to engage with each other and reflect in this interactive way.
And Padlet is one of the tools that is on my tips and resources. It's actually one of my favorites to use as well. It's very easy and very interactive. But there's also PictoChart. So that one you can make infographics, presentations, share information. So if you depending on what you are hoping that reflection looks like for your students, that might be a good option. Flipgrid is another one. It allows teachers to create grids to facilitate video discussions. So if you think of the grid as a message board, you can pose questions and have students post their responses. Again, Padlet, great collaborative board space. Where you can, there's a voting feature, so it's also great for coming to consensus. So if you have your ideas up there, students can comment, they can vote, different things like that. And then Jamboard is another one that we like to use. And that one also allows for that group processing of concepts and the collaboration and sharing out. We use that one quite a bit with our teen driver safety group, so they can share ideas and reflections about what how their projects are going and the challenges they're facing, and can pose questions to others. So just some additional resources for you as you're thinking about how do I best engage young people in this virtual environment that we're in.
Yeah, these are all super engaging and really, I haven't used Jamboard, but the rest are super engaging and fun to use.
I just learned about Jamboard. It's through Google.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's like kind of, again, trying to find the silver lining in all of this nonsense that is COVID. I think there are so many cool tools out there, and a lot of them are coming to the surface. And the more that we share best practices and resources with each other, the more we can enhance our experiences and our students' experiences. So demonstration. So we do all this work, we do all this planning, we do all this prep, we make great things happen, and then we're tired and we want to go to sleep. But it's important not to stop there. We really want to make sure that we are demonstrating what's happening for lots of reasons, right? One, to celebrate student achievement and for students to see that what they did made a difference, and for them to show off what they did to other people. Could be their parents, could be their other teachers, could be other community members, could be the press, could be social media, right? There's lots of different audiences that we can be excited to share the work that we've done. And I think something that I've always kind of led with in my role working with young people is that if you read the news, there is a lot of sad and depressing and negative news about, especially I live in a city, right? Students in Philadelphia get a really bad reputation. They get there's a lot of gun violence and drugs in our city. And so that's what's covered on the news. But I'm here to fight back and tell you that our students are doing a lot of really gorgeous, beautiful, helpful, kind, compassionate things. And so that's the stuff that I want people to know about and see. And I want to change the narrative around that. And so by doing demonstration, and really showing and showcasing and highlighting the beautiful things that students are doing, hopefully we can begin to change the narrative about young people, to Amy's point in the beginning of the presentation. And so we want to educate and inform others. And this is still an extension of an opportunity for students to continue to learn. And the integration of technology through demonstration is something that can help students refresh and remember how to public speak, or how to put together a presentation, or how to write a press release, or how to do these really important skills. So the learning doesn't end even when we're celebrating and demonstrating.
I would just add too, just quickly, that demonstration is almost like the summative assessment, right? Like think about the entire process that students have gone through. This is the book report at the end of reading the book. This is that big midterm test that demonstrates the knowledge that they've learned throughout this process. So if you think about demonstration through that lens, you can really think about then how students will be able to demonstrate the learning outcomes that you wanted for your students through this service learning pedagogy.
Yep. Exactly. So one of the ways that we did this in person was at the end of a summer program. We had a summer program called Career Exposure Summer Academy, where students spent 6 weeks going on field trips, but also learning about social issues and 21st century skills that they needed to be successful in high school and in middle school. And only 80 students in our district were able to participate in this program. And so the charge we gave them was, okay, 80 of however many thousands of students in our district were able to be part of this program. How are you going to be responsible for what you learned and share that with your peers? And so they wanted to make presentations to share with their peers. They created relationships with different guidance counselors in the different high schools in our and middle schools in our district, and they made pamphlets and PowerPoint presentations and websites and social media campaigns to share with those counselors around different important skills that they needed to be successful. And so we had a family night at the end of the summer where we invited our principals. Right there is our former CEO, our school leaders, our families, to see what the students had done. And so each student kind of had a booth and shared what they had done. And it was an opportunity to bring a larger community in, not just the community that they were serving, in to see what they had done. And this presentation, to Amy's point, could be a great opportunity for assessment, right? Assessing their public speaking, assessing their ability to create the PowerPoint and how that flowed, and did it have all of the important information that was needed. So virtually, so social media is almost every school now has a social media channel, or you can use your website, or you can use a press release. But it's really great and easy, quick way to share the great things that are happening. And students can be the ones to create the copy, or to come up with the pictures, or to create a plan for how and when the posts are going to happen. Or they can tell you which platforms people are using more than you probably know. I tend to default to Facebook, which no students really use anymore. So we use Facebook to get in touch with parents, and we use Instagram to get in touch with students. And New Foundations doesn't have a TikTok or a Snapchat, but that's where the youth are. And so some schools might have those platforms. So really allowing students to have a voice, even in this experience, about where should we demonstrate what we've been doing. Nobody wants to, run an article in the paper anymore, right? Because nobody's going to be picking up the paper. But leveraging the things you already have in front of you that families might be seeing, or the community might be seeing, to highlight the great work that you all are doing in your schools and communities.
And again, for doing this virtually, some of these I may have mentioned before, but again, Eastly, those infographics are a great way for students to demonstrate the impact that they've had in the community, what they've done and what that looks like. We Video gives that has all the bells and whistles to create really cool videos, which, as Tiffany mentioned, a lot of their students love to do and have for a very long time. Animoto is for creating and sharing videos, and there's no software downloads, which can often be a challenge if students are using school technology. eMaze is a web-based tool, so students can create and share presentations online. Canva is one that I love very much. We use it all the time. You can create flyers and newsletters and any different ways to communicate, even like a year-end service learning report, right? Like there's templates in there, and they can get so creative to share out what they've learned and what they've done through their service learning projects. And then Powtoon is an animation software. So you've got some creative souls in those classrooms. And so that's a great one to let them just get creative and tell their story in a new and exciting way. I think demonstration really empowers students to get creative and to be able to tell their story, and then to be able to tweet that out or share that, or, hopefully we'll be back and parents and community members can come in and really see the impact of what the students have experienced. So demonstration is definitely tied to celebration, but a way for students to really talk about all that they've done and all that they've learned.
Exactly.
So we went through the IPART process, and it really does ask teachers to think differently about how they engage students, right? So this vision of learning really flips the traditional classroom setting. Students are working together in groups. They're collaborating, they're coming to consensus around what actions they want to take. And I think what's really important to the service learning process is that students are really helping other students, right? They're teaching each other. And teachers really become these guides. They're encouraging students on this journey of self-discovery. You know the outcomes you want for your students and you're guiding them. And students are really the one engaging in this learning process. So we know that service learning is effective, right? It's brain-based learning. It works when there's active engagement during the learning process. And you start to see these outcomes in a lot of different areas. So personal development, students see themselves as change makers, as leaders, as contributors to a better world. We see social and interpersonal development, from social comfort and group work to social sensitivity, and intergenerational connectedness. Going back to Tiffany's example with the elderly folks in her community. We see outcomes in value development and academic and cognitive development. Students become better critical thinkers and increase their subject area knowledge. They're diving deep into what it is that they're studying because they want to make a difference. They want to see the impact and the change that they can have. There's a great deal of research that really supports the benefits of service learning, including that greater connection to coursework, the sense of community within the classroom and the school, as well as that new type of relationship that's built between the teacher and the student. It builds self-confidence and empowerment, and it's a strong predictor of that commitment to civic participation, which I talked about early on. Students get to learn between fact and fiction. They plan in teams. All of these skill sets are so valuable. It's not about just being able to name the state capitals. It's not memorizing those things, right? It's about engaging with the knowledge that they're learning in a real dynamic way that is it's lifelong learning. And I think I would say today more than ever, we talk about the fact that our workforce is in desperate need of workers with those critical thinking skills, those 21st century skills, like I mentioned earlier on. And service learning does that. It's that type of learning that really engages students with all of these learning outcomes. And it's a powerful teaching and learning strategy that we hope you learned a little bit about today.
Thanks, Amy. Just to round us out, so why should we be doing service learning now during the pandemic? And there's a lot going on, and it's really hard to prioritize all of the things that we need to do. Many of us are actually, running with a curtailed instruction schedule, and we're not really at our full instructional hours. But why should we prioritize service learning? And for all the reasons Amy just said, all of the benefits, yes. But service learning is such an important way for us to feel connected to ourselves, to our communities, to our peers, to our school. And this is something that's pretty difficult during a pandemic when we're not physically together. And so this is a way to bring us all back into community with one another. And there are so many people in our community now more than ever that need support due to the pandemic, either economically or health and wellness. And there's endless ways that we can find to support one another. And so using technology and using the skills and talents we have, we can really empower our students and use that willingness to help and not sure what to do to engage in this work in a meaningful way with each other and make a difference in our communities, both locally and globally.
So we encourage you, if you have any questions, we have just around a minute left for our session. So please ask them in the chat box if you have them. And then as a final takeaway, I would just encourage folks at www.nylc.org. We have a ton of service learning resources and more information that you can delve deeper in, including some toolkits on specific topics, different age groups. So we encourage you to use those. And um, my final reflection would be to remember that service learning isn't something that you have to do in addition to all of the other things that you're doing already on a day-to-day basis, which is unbelievably full. Service learning is a way of teaching and learning. So it's a way to teach math. It's a way to teach English. It's a way to teach social studies. Pick your subject area. Service learning is a teaching and learning strategy. So it's not something to do in addition to, it's a different way of teaching. So I encourage you to think of it as that strategy and not something else that we're asking you to do. Any final words, Tiff?
No, thanks you so much for being here. And Amy and the NYLC is a plethora of really amazing resources. So I strongly encourage you checking out that website. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to either of us via email, and we'd be happy to follow up with you.
Thanks for being here.